Hey, I'm James. Welcome to Game Stories, where we write games that tell stories. And in this episode, we are talking about how to build characters out of variables. If you've been following the series so far, you've probably seen some instances where choices and the variables that are attached to them allow players to construct their character through play. For example, in a previous episode, I framed a choice where a player could either kill a dog to make some money or not. I also framed a different choice where a lady who needed to get ready for work could sneak out the window instead. And if she did, we found out she was a secret smoker. Choices like this allow players to, in the course of play, determine not only the outcome of events or the direction of events, but what kind of character they're playing. And that's a good goal to shoot for, I think. You don't always have to do it, but it's a good thing if you can give players a choice if they want to be nasty or nice or strong and straightforward or sneaky and backstabbing or whatever set of traits are appropriate to the kind of story you want to tell, to give them a sense of that range and the ability to play through your story as different kinds of people. But there's another important way that variables work and choices work in determining character in games. And that is something that happens before games even start. A lot of games allow players to craft a character first and then play through the game. So they set a bunch of variables about their character, and then that variable set interacts with the narrative as they go forward. This is something that's been true all the way back to Dungeons & Dragons. Let's take a look at the latest character sheet from D&D. This is a 5th edition character sheet. And you can see there's a lot of boxes on this form. You can write your name and some basic info. You can write some core commitments here about who your character is and what they care about, sort of their defense values and how fast they move, what kind of spells and weapons they have, what languages they speak, and so on. And then over here, you've got a set of core qualities of the character that are going to be the primary qualities that interact with the actions they'll take in the world. In a D&D, that's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So the way that these attributes work is you'll roll some dice, you'll get some numbers for these, and that'll give you a kind of a bonus or a negative modifier to your rolls that affect certain kinds of things your character might do. So, for example, if I was a character, dropping my books. If I was a character that had a really high dexterity skill, then I would be good at doing things that require acrobatics or sleight of hand or stealth. So if I wanted to sneak up on somebody, it would be good if I had a lot of dexterity, a high dexterity modifier. Or if I wanted to jump across the bar room and swing on a chandelier and kick somebody in the face, do something acrobatic like that, then again, it would be good if I had a high dexterity modifier here, like a +3 or 4 or something. Because when I sort of announce to the Dungeon Master that I'm going to do something, Dungeon Master will set some kind of goal, some sort of number that's a goal for me. I'll roll a 20-sided die trying to hit that goal or above, and I'll add whatever modifier I have for the relevant trait. So this is really just sort of like a simple system of variables, numeric variables that then interact with the fiction as we start to play the game. This is true, this kind of thing is true now of major digital role-playing games. This is a screenshot from Fallout 4. No, I'm sorry, this is a screenshot from Fallout New Vegas. But the same basic system, I think, is used in Fallout 4. You can see on a screen like this, you can change the appearance of your character, physical appearance. On subsequent screens, you can kind of give them some different skills. And then you sort of play this little barroom game to set a set of characteristics that are very much, they're not identical to, but they're very much like the D&D stats. You can see they have strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, luck. A lot of those are pretty close to the D&D stuff. As you play through this game, you'll be setting... you'll be ranking these stats. You'll have a certain number of points to spend, and you'll get to choose how strong you get to be, for example, and how how much agility you have, for example. And if you're not very agile, you might be an oaf or accident prone. Or if you're very agile, you might be an acrobatic marvel or a knife catcher, right? So it's just really a set of, and they'll basically work exactly the same way, which is you'll encounter something in the game world that you'll try to do, and the computer will say, well, is your stat for this high enough? And it may do some random number generation and see if you succeed or fail. So the higher you are in agility, the better you are at doing agile things in the world of Fallout New Vegas. If you want to see how this plays out, you can, well, of course, you can play the game in different ways. Or you can watch this really excellent video by Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit. He's got this video, Anatomy of a Side Quest. And in it, he plays Fallout New Vegas. He plays a specific side quest in Fallout New Vegas. And he plays it over and over and over again with different character builds. So he'll build a character that's like really sneaky and good at talking to people, and then he'll beat this side quest using those traits. And then he'll start over and he'll play it again, and he'll make someone really strong that has a good reputation, and he'll go in and get the backing of certain people and then sort of punch his way through to victory, right? And he'll do that again with different kinds of, you can see him making his build here. It's going to be sneaky, lots of karma, so forth. Anyway, I recommend this video if you want to see a good model for how to think about the stats we give characters and how those stats will affect the choices that players have during the game with their characters. So definitely watch that. But not right now. Not right now. Right now, yeah, we'll come back to that. Right now, let's look at some basic ways to do variables that help you build characters before games. And let's do that with 3 different kinds of variables, because it's sort of important to know the range of variables at this point. We've worked so far with boolean variables, and I'll show you a little bit about how to use those to build a character. We'll look at an example from the book I dropped earlier, Heart of Ice. And we will look at, what are the other kinds of variables? Boolean strings, which are like lists of letters. And we'll look at those and use those to make characters. And then numbers. You can see that in D&D and in Fallout New Vegas, for example, numbers are really important. So I'll give you a sense of how to kind of use those to make some stats. Okay, let's get started in Twine. Oh no, wait. Actually, before this, I want to show you how Heart of Ice does this with Boolean variables. Heart of Ice is a game book that, unlike many game books, doesn't use any random number generation and doesn't need numbers for its stats in order to make them work. You can see there's a little character sheet here at the beginning, and it's just got a spot for 4 skills and some items and some money. And then you have sort of a choice of different characters you can be. You can be an explorer, a bounty hunter, a spy, trader, and so forth. And each of them have a set of 4 skills. I think I scanned some of these pages. Yes, I did. So you have the choice of these skills that you can have that have different in-game effects. You don't know exactly what they're going to do for you during the course of the game, but you get the idea that if you have the piloting skill, it may come up during the course of the game that you can fly an air sled around. That seems like it might be good. And if you have roguery, you might be good at being sneaky and picking pockets and opening locks. That seems like it might be good too. So you got to pick 4 of these, or pick a character type that has 4 of these, and then play through the story. Then the game book has a way of checking to see if you have these skills. So let's take a look at that. Passage 264 happens pretty early in one particular branch of the game. I guess mild spoilers, but it's worth knowing this anyway. So in this scene, you are walking across a snowy ledge. It's very cold, and there's some frozen bodies like standing in the snow ahead of you. They're dead. And it says this: Botch, the guy you're walking with, Botch scrambles up the ledge and goes through the pockets of one of the corpses. I don't like robbing the dead, but there might be some food, he mutters. If you have roguery, turn to 328. If not, but you have paradoxing, turn to 370. If you have neither, turn to 306. So this is, remember at the beginning of the game, we choose these traits, and if I have some of them, it's going to give me some extra content. So if I have roguery, let's go see what that does. I get to 328. And it tells me this. Botch is not only interested in food. While he extracts a parcel of rations from one of the corpse's pockets, his other hand adroitly filches a money token out of its wallet. He slips this into his boot without telling you. A casual observer would never have noticed it. Not to be outdone, you deftly remove the token while Botch is checking another of the bodies. Touching it to your own money token, you transfer the sum of 60 scads. Add this to the total on your adventure sheet. And then replace the token before Botch is any the wiser. So if you had Rogue and you were in the scene, you get $60, basically. Seems like a good deal. If you have paradoxing, go to 370. So notice that this was sort of the second choice on the first passage. Let's go back up. If you have roguery, go to here. If not, but you have paradoxing, 370. So if I have both of these skills, I get both of these benefits, and it just sort of rolls one into the next, right? So then I go to 370, and it has sort of a longer passage. No thoughts remain in the dead minds of these unfortunates. No ordinary psychic could glean anything from them now, but with your special talent, you might be able to reconstruct the last thing they saw. So now there's a passage about like reading the minds of these dead people. And sort of looking into their thoughts. And then in any case, at the end of it, you go to 306, just like you would have if you didn't have any of those skills, and move on with the game just like it was going to anyway. So having these traits, in this case, just sort of unlocks different parts of the narrative that wouldn't have unlocked otherwise. And if we didn't have them, we wouldn't see them. But then we would have different traits that would unlock different parts of the narrative later. And no matter what we choose, the kind of character that's going to be revealed to us in these passages is the kind of character that has those kind of skills. We have the skill of roguery. We're kind of a sneaky person, so we can do a quick pickpocketing thing, right? We're a psychic, so we can do a psychic thing here and get that kind of content. So let's see how we might implement something like that in Twine. So I basically just tried to implement the beginning of Heart of Ice here and just chose the first two character types that are listed in the game book, right? The Explorer and Bounty Hunter. And I told the player you can pick one, Explorer with these skills or Bounty Hunter with those skills. In the next passage, it sets variables that represent each of those skills to true. And it says, you are an explorer, and it describes those skills a little bit so the player kind of has an idea of what sorts of things might be happening. And then I have continue, and I don't have anything yet. I want to test for those variables. So let's see what the explorer have. He has a lore, streetwise, close combat, survival. So let's say you are walking down the busy streets of the city, and we'll end with you need a place to sleep. Look for hotels. That'll be the thing that just ends this passage and moves the story forward. But if you have some of these skills, maybe you'll see something extra on the streets. So let's say if lore is true, then print some text here. You notice the buildings are old in the style of the ancients. And I don't know, something about what? The drug shop on the corner is built into what looks like an ancient temple. So if I know lore, I can read the buildings, and then I can notice something funny about one of them that might be promising, right? And I can go into this, maybe go into the drug shop and go into the back room and, you know, kick open an old wall or something and find the ancient temple. Let's see, what else could you notice? If, what was the other one? Streetwise is true. You notice a You also is not going to work if they don't both show up. You notice a woman picking pockets. When she sees you, she darts down an alley. So if I got streetwise, I'm paying attention to certain stuff. If I got lore, I'm paying attention to certain stuff. I could put a bunch of other text in here if I wanted to, so that no matter what your character was, they would notice different kinds of things in the street, and they would have different kinds of choices to branch off from here. And if none of them applied, then you'd just be able to go look for some hotels. And probably, if I'm going to save myself some time, these will be just brief passages that lead back to here, right? And give me a little bit of narrative information. But if I want, I can make them hugely branching, right, based on the character. Let's test that to see if it works. Oh, there's all my ancient temples and stuff. So let's play from here. Pick a character type. I want to be an explorer. You're an explorer. Here's all the skills and how they matter. Continue. You're walking on the busy streets. You notice the buildings are in the style of the ancients. Something blah, blah, blah. Ancient temple. Picking pockets. She goes down an alley. You need a place to sleep. Look for hotels. So that's a very simple way to implement the stuff that, like the boolean version of the character builder that's in Heart of Ice. Pick some skills, let the players sort of pick a set of skills at the beginning of the game, and then use those skills or traits or whatever you want to call them during passages, test for them during passages to allow the character to notice different stuff or engage differently in their surroundings, to learn different things and gain different items. Or even take different branches than they would have noticed or been available to them otherwise. So, and you can do all that with what we've learned so far, right? Boolean variables that shouldn't be news to you if you've been following along. Okay, but there's other kinds of variables that allow you to do different kinds of things. So let's look at them. Next one is strings, meaning like a set of words. So, for example, if I wanted to set variable to something in quotes, then it's going to be a word. So let's say meatball. So variable is now meatball, and when I say I want to eat var, I want to eat a var. When this passage plays, it's going to set var to meatball, and then it's going to encounter this text, I want to eat a var. It's going to check its memory for what is this variable, and it's going to find out this variable is meatball, string, and then it's going to print that string right here. So let's take a look to see if that worked. And yes, it did. I want to eat a meatball. If we change that variable to something else, I want to eat a beer. And then play it. Now the variable is something else, so I want to eat a pear. And you can use this in all kinds of ways to change up the text of your story, which is fun in a system like Twine. So how might we implement something like that in character creation? One way is to give players a choice of pronouns before the game begins. This is a list of a bunch of different kinds of pronouns. Some of which you may not be familiar with, some of which I'm not familiar with, but you should recognize he, him, his, and she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. The other ones might be or might not be as familiar to you. But I will show you really briefly how to make a system that allows players to choose their preferred pronouns before the game starts. And I'm just going to focus on he, she, and they, and in only a couple of these cases. I'm going to do the subject, the object, and the possessive. Okay. If you want the reflexive or whatever, then, or if you want more of these pronouns, then you'll have to revisit this and use the same stuff that I'm about to show you to do more. So, pronouns. So the first passage here just gives you a choice. Which pronouns does your character prefer? He, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. And I've been working on they, them, theirs. So I'll come back to this. And then there's going to be a next button and a passage that tests these. A first passage that uses these variables. Your character wakes up in his, her, or their bed. They, he or she, I'm sorry, his, her, or their hands are cold. He, she, or they look around in the darkness, and he, she, or they feel afraid. It was like something was out there waiting to get him, her, or them. So depending on what choices they make, these pronoun places are going to fill in differently. And you notice I've got the possessive case, his bed, her bed, their bed. I've got the caps version of the possessive case, his hands, her hands, or their hands, but it's the beginning of a sentence, so I need it to come out capitalized. I've got the subject case in caps. He looks around the darkness at the beginning of the sentence, or she looks, or they look, and it's they looks. So I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the non-capitalized version of the subject, because it's not the beginning of the sentence, but it's still a subject. He feels afraid, they feel afraid, she feels afraid. And then the object form is here, which I don't think is ever at the beginning of a sentence. So I haven't put a capitalized version. Come up with a sentence that does it. See if you can. It was like something was out there waiting to get him, her, or them, right? So I need pronouns for each of those cases. Let's go back to see what I've done so far. I've got the subject case, they, and the subject caps, they. Now I need the possessive case to there. And I need set possessive caps to there. And I need set the objective case to them. Right? If this is a little bit grammar heavy, I'm sorry. But basically what I'm doing here is using pronouns in the different ways that you use pronouns in sentences. And I need different versions of the pronouns to cover all the different ways they come up in sentences, right? There's the subject kind, where they come up at the beginning of the sentence and are the subject. He ran into the woods. She ran into the woods. They ran into the woods. There's the possessive kind, where we use a pronoun to show ownership. His meatball, her meatball, their meatball. And there's the objective case, which is when we show that something's being done to that person through a pronoun. The meatball ate him, the meatball ate her, the meatball ate them, right? So I've got all those cases here, and for a couple of them I've used the capitalized version because sometimes it'll happen at the beginning of sentences. And it should work now for they, them, theirs. If I was going to do him and her, I'd have to go back in and substitute all those in the other passages here. So let's just play this then. Let's debug this debug version. Which pronoun does your character prefer? They, them, theirs. They, them, theirs. Got it. Your character wakes up in their bed. Their hands are cold. They looks around the darkness and they feels afraid. Notice we have a problem. It was like something was out there waiting to get them. So for the most part, the pronouns are working. They're in the right spot. They're saying the right thing. And we left it up to the players to choose how we wanted those blanks filled in, and they did. The only problem here is that we have what is normally, quote unquote, a plural pronoun, and it's got the wrong kind of subject verb agreement now, right? They looks isn't quite right. We would normally have to say they look. Should I show you how to fix that? Sure. You can fix that with a simple if, or actually an unless statement is probably the easiest way to do it. So right in between look and the S, I want to put something that says only display this if it's not a plural adjective, or it's not they. We'll just do that. So unless they is true, S. Oh, I forgot the colon. Unless they is true, print the S. So if they is false, or they is zero, really, if they is zero, then it's going to print the S. If it's him or her, S gets shown. But if it's they, it doesn't get shown. This should work. I'm going to put the same thing right here for the other S. And then I have to go set this variable to true in the they passage. So one more. They. Set they to, no, not in quotes, true. It's really important here that you don't put the Boolean variable in quotes, because the Boolean is not a string. It's a value, true. If I put it in quotes, it's going to turn it into a string that's the letters TRUE, and it won't be the value true anymore, right? So we don't put that. Be careful with your quotes. Let's close that and play through. I like they, them, theirs. We'll go next. Your character, excuse me, your character wakes up in their bed, their hands are cold, they look around in the darkness and they feel afraid. So now you can see that we got proper subject-verb agreement because variables are working. Okay, so what have we covered so far? We've covered Boolean variables and how to use them to do stuff like this right here. I recommend reading this book. It's very fun. We've covered string variables and how to use them to substitute words into a set of text, different words depending on choices the characters make. And of course, there's a lot of different ways to use that other than just pronouns, right? You can use names and descriptions and actions and all kinds of things you can do with that. So now we're on to numbers. And we saw numbers at work already in Dungeons and Dragons, which uses numbers to determine whether or not you can do stuff. And the same in games like Fallout, where you have to set some numbers at the beginning of the game, and then it determines whether or not you can do stuff in the game. So let's look over here at numbers. I've got a first passage that says, do you want to be a fighter, wizard, or thief? And it gives you some stats for each of those, for strength, wisdom, and charisma. Excuse me. And then if you choose, I'm only working on the fighter so far. If you choose the fighter, it sets those stats to those numbers and says fighter and go forward. And then in the forward passage, it tells you what your strength, what your stats are. It prints them. So it should print the number just like it prints a string. If you use the variable in text like this, it should print the value of the variable unless it's a Boolean. A Boolean will just be blank. So if it's true or false as a Boolean, it won't work. But if it's a string that's a name or it's a number, then it should show up. And then we'll have some choices here. Fight the dragon, reason with the dragon, or flirt with the dragon. Notice those choices each correspond to the different stats that we've got. And then in a passage like fight the dragon, we test. If strength is greater than 15, you have defeated the dragon, hooray. Else, meaning it's 15 or less, are you kidding? He roasts you alive. So let's just play through this to see how it goes. You want to be a fighter, wizard, or thief? And these are undeveloped right now, so we'll go fighter. Fighter! And we can't see those things being set, but they're being set. Your strength is 18, your wisdom is 3, your charisma is 12. So we probably better fight that dragon, and it's going to test to see if our strength is greater than 15. You've defeated the dragon. Hooray. So what if, though, we wanted him to fail? Like, let's test one of his stats that's not so good. What's the fighter's? Wisdom is quite low. It's 3. He should not be reasoning with the dragon. So let's go in here and do that. If wisdom is, not is, you don't want to use is here. Wisdom less than 10. Oh, sorry. Let's start with the greater than. Wisdom is greater than 10, so like the wizard should be fine. I think the thief too. You and the dragon have a very nice chat about economic policy. Else, so it means that it was not greater than 10. He thinks you are dumb and eats you. So if we're the fighter, that's a dangerous choice for us. Let's see what happens. You want to be a fighter? Yep. Go forward, sure. Wisdom is low. Should I reason with the dragon? Oh, let's try it. Oh, he thinks you're dumb and eats you. But if I had a different character, I would have had a success that way and maybe not a success the other way. I think that's all you need to see right now. You can do things with numbers that you can't do, obviously, with booleans, and that you can't do with strings, and that is math. You can do math with numbers, and you can make math work in all kinds of ways with these stats. So this is going to be important. Knowing how to do numbers and how to check them is going to be really important moving forward. So test this. Note that these are not in quotes. They're just the number there. You set to a number, and then when you test, you just use the operator sign. You don't say, you don't use the word is, right? You can do equals, you can do greater than, you can do less than. Oh, not all at once though. What were we doing here? Greater than 15. So I will show you some math probably next time around. I'll show you how to use numeric variables to create kind of dynamic characters over the course of the game, characters that change over the course of the game, and depending on your choices can get different results later on based on how high or how low the numbers have evolved as they went. And we'll look at, I think, a couple different sort of a simple equation and then a more complicated equation for doing that. I think that's what we'll do. But for now, just play the assignment. The assignment is to play with all these things. Try to do something that does all of these, if you can. Give players an opportunity to build a character that uses Boolean variables. And in the same story or same test story, add in other kinds of variables or separate them out like I have here. Give them a chance to set, doesn't have to be pronouns, but give them a chance to set string variables that will print later, like they can have a choice of what their character is named or what their character looks like that will print later in the story. Give them some kind of numerical stat and then test for that later in the story too. If you can try to work this back into a story you've already built, cool. Otherwise, just try to build something new and play around with these. Just make sure you can do all of the different kinds of variables and test for them, because we're going to be building on this to do more advanced stuff later on, especially the math. So get your numbers down. All right, I guess that's it for this time. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do. If you have questions, throw them in the comments below, or if you are in my class, ask me in person, and I'll see you next time.